if you're listening to Psych with Mike because you believe in the quality psychology information that you hear on this program, then do things to help us out. Go to YouTube and subscribe to the Psych with Mike channel. Go to Twitter and subscribe to @PsychWithMike. Go to Facebook, and also now go to TikTok @PsychWithMike. So go ahead and subscribe to all of those different ways of being able to stay connected to the show. But most importantly, go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a comment. That is really, really beneficial. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Welcome into Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahana. I don't know if I got that on the tape.
Oh, well, you'll find out when you try to do the editing.
I was hoping. Do you want to repeat it?
I wasn't listening.
Oh. You were rambling.
I don't listen when I talk.
Yeah.
That's one of my failings.
So I recently, in an episode that we had recorded, was talking about how much I like you and how much that I am delighted that other people like you.
And we were in agreement.
And I'm hoping that that doesn't
go to my head. Too late, man.
And get used against me at some point.
What can I tell you?
Yeah. So
well, probably already has been. But it can't be again.
Yeah, you know who likes Brett?
Me.
Brett.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think Phyllis likes you too. I think Phyllis likes you too.
Phyllis loves me. Bless her heart.
Bless her.
Bless her. God bless her heart.
That's right.
It's a southernism. Bless your little heart.
But yeah. I've heard that.
Yeah.
No one's ever said it to me, but
they've said it about you. I've heard them say, "Oh, bless his heart."
Bless his heart. Yeah, not in a good way.
No.
So one of the things that is near and dear to me, besides just hammering on the need for people to really explore their own emotional regulation, is what are the different developmental stages of psychology. So you and I have both taught developmental psychology. I teach specifically psychology of adolescence, which is actually the class that I'm teaching now. And that's why that brought this to the fore for me, because I really think that most, if not all, or the overwhelming majority of friction that adults have with adolescents is because they don't understand the way in which adolescents think, and adolescents can't help the developmental stage that they're in. Do you think that there's anything to that?
I agree with you. I think there are other elements involved. One of them is that adults tend to think that they have, by right of existence, some kind of power or control that they can impose on or require the adolescent to think, behave, believe a certain way, whether it's a religious belief. I remember being in college many years ago, back in the dark ages, and a bunch of roommates were sitting around having a BS session one night talking about religion and different faiths that they represented or were represented among them, and questions that they had going through that developmental stage of their life, questioning those things. And at the time, there was a lot of data about young adults going to church with their families until they were 18 or 19 and going off to college and not going to church for maybe 4 or 5 years while they explored the world and thought concepts and so on. And then in their early 20s, finding their way back to church. And so we were discussing that information. A couple of us were taking sociology classes, and that was a focus of the discussion. And this one roommate was saying that he belonged to this particular faith, and he'd never questioned, he'd never entertained a doubt about it at all, never saw any inconsistency in it or anything in what the church taught that he had reservations about. And we asked him, why? How can it be that you don't at least knock at the door of doubt or have a question about some of this? And he said, because my parents have never lied to me, and this is a church they took me to and told me it was the right thing to believe. So I don't have any doubts.
And you don't think that's a good thing?
No.
You think that adolescents should question
I think
things?
It's an inherent feature of maturation. You have to question. You have to doubt. And you have to find answers that you can live with. And you struggle As you do, but that's part of the life process.
You believe that that young man ended up having a crisis. It wasn't in college, but it would have been later.
I don't know him later. I believe he did. I believe it was coming down the road.
Yeah. So, just for the sake of elucidating a little bit more about this, what is the most significant developmental feature of adolescence for you?
I think the return of no.
Okay.
2-year-olds. First thing they learn, they all no. You want a cookie? No. First thing they say is no before they even heard what you are going to say.
Right.
You want some ice cream? No. Then they learn to say, well, maybe I'll take ice cream, but don't tell me anything else. You know? Yeah. And then that goes away, and then it comes back when you're a teenager.
And so we're on the same page, because that actually is a product of what Jean Piaget called egocentrism. And so you are egocentric when you're an infant.
I forget sometimes how Piagetian you are.
Well, I am in this case.
Yeah.
When you're an infant, you are all egocentric. Egocentrism just means that you don't recognize that other people have different perceptions.
It's all about me. Yeah.
And so baby cries in the middle of the night and doesn't care who it wakes up, because it's all about the baby. So then that kind of goes away as a child and as a pre-adolescent, but during adolescence, egocentrism returns with two unique concepts associated with it: the perceived audience and the personal fable. So the idea that everybody is always looking at me and cares about what I do, and the idea that somehow my life is going to work out in a way that may be magical or fantastical, and you don't understand that, but I am completely on board. So I think that a lot of what people see in adolescence that they don't like and cause them consternation is really this emergence of the egocentrism, the reemergence of egocentrism, but the adolescent can't help it. They're in that developmental stage. And then there's a lot of biology stuff that's obviously going on too, and we could just get really, really into the weeds.
Well, yeah, but that's like I can't think of the word I want to use, the descriptor. It's about the legend of the frog and the scorpion. You know, the frog and the scorpion are traveling along the road, separate, but at the same time. And they come to a river, and they can't get across the river. There's no bridge. And they start up a conversation about how frustrating that is. And the scorpion says, well, you're a frog. You can swim. I'll hop on your back, and you take me across the river. The frog's like, no, you're a scorpion. You'll sting me. I'll die. No, I won't. I wouldn't do that. I mean, I need to get to the other side of the river. And you have to believe me. You have to trust me. And all that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Finally, the frog says, well, I'm going to go across the river. I'll take you. I'm a nice guy. So the scorpion hops on his back, and they get halfway across the river, and the scorpion stings the frog. And the frog's freezing up, paralysis, and he gasps, why? And the scorpion said, it's what we do.
I can't stop being a scorpion.
I can't stop. Yeah, it's what we do. Adolescents are the same way.
Exactly.
So if you can understand that, you can avoid a lot of heartache.
But I don't think that.
And also, if you can understand that your child is not a detachable piece of you.
I think that is huge.
Because
absolutely.
They have their own life. They have their own values. Maybe their values overlap. I mean, I'm thrilled beyond measure when I hear my words come out of my son's mouth, not in a hateful, sarcastic way, but because he's internalized them. And I hear him say them. You know, I'm getting too old for this crap. You know, I say that all the time. He says that. He's 26 years old. Something's happening and he doesn't want to deal with it. He's like, I'm too old for this. And my wife will look at me and nudge me, and she's like, did you hear that come out of his mouth? He does that kind of stuff. I love it because he's internalized pieces of me that he's found value in, that he incorporates into himself. And that's the ideal, that's the goal, but you can't force it. You can't make it happen. And when you try to make it happen as the aggressive, controlling father, you destroy the relationship, and you may destroy the child. You may break them. You can kill them.
And so what I encourage people to do
Yeah.
is to approach it from a position of acknowledging the adolescent's reality, but then offering an alternative. Well, I know that you see it this way. This is how I see it.
We
and
see
I'm
that
just
in therapy all the time with adolescents. I'd say to an adolescent, you and I both know your parents are crazy as hell. And you're bucking the system because you can't stand it. You have a choice to make. Can you learn how to tolerate it until you can get out on your own and do whatever you want to do? Or do you have to be the scorpion here and destroy the family?
right.
And because that's what you're getting set up to do. And you're going to carry the price for years. You're going to jail. You're being a drug addict. You're going to have these issues. They're going to follow you in your life. And your parents are going to be sitting around saying, where did we
Right.
go wrong?
Sure.
You can't fix them. You're not going to change them. You can change you. Can we work on that? Are
But
you willing to hear that?
Another thing that's going on biologically that I'm sure the adolescent doesn't know and the parents probably don't know is that the emotional centers of your brain, specifically the limbic system and the amygdala, are actually operating much faster and maturating much more quickly than the cognitive parts of your
You
brain.
said that so much better than I could.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're really good at that.
I think that you're spoofing me.
You get lost in that stuff. Yeah.
Well, but it's a real thing.
It is a real thing. Yeah.
Adolescents they feel like they can think abstractly, and to a certain extent they can, but they are also overwhelmed by the emotionality of their rapidly maturating brain. And they don't recognize that. And a parent can take that into consideration and say, okay, this adolescent is saying things that I think are emotionally immature.
Yeah. So how many times have you said to a parent, don't get all worked up by what they say.
Yeah.
Look at their behavior. Because he may say, I hate you.
Right.
I'm going to quit school. I'm going to, whatever.
And then go study.
And yeah.
Right.
And the parents are all bent out of shape because he's not allowed to say damn. He said damn to his mother. I'll show him. No, you won't show him, except you'll show him that one way he can turn you inside out is say damn to his mother.
Absolutely.
So, but is that what you want? You want to be caught up in that emotional velocity every day because you give him a button that he can push? Or do you want him to develop appropriately and turn into the kind of man that can regulate his own emotions and make his own choices, and they're good choices?
Right.
What are you trying to do here? I mean, you're a parent.
And my days of parenting an adolescent are way, way, way in the rearview mirror. But I still remember having adolescent children, and one of the things that I remember most intently was that my son, who would sometimes do things that were not completely appropriate. Neither one of my children was particularly bad, but he would do things that were upsetting to both me and his mother. And I would go to him and I would say, hey, this is something that you did and I'm upset about it. And he might, even MF me, but I recognized that if I could walk away within 48 hours, he would always come back and say, I did that, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. And I would say that to his mother.
My wife is one of them.
And she couldn't ever wait the 48 hours.
No, she couldn't do it. I know your wife. She couldn't do it. My wife is one of the most moderate women I've ever met. She handles that stuff and positions herself perfectly more often than not. But my son could get to her in ways that would just cause her to decompensate. And we would all be sitting at the dining room table having dinner, and he would set her off. And she'd slam her fork down, and she'd glare at both of us, and she'd get up and leave the room, go upstairs and slam the bedroom door. And he would look at me with his wide eyes, ingenue
What
look.
did I do?
And I would just shake my head and say, you know what you did, and you know what you have to do to fix it, and you are going to have to fix it. I'm not going to get involved. And he would sit there, and he would drum his fingers on the table and take some deep sighs and shake his head. Then he'd go knock on the door, and I'd hear him whispering. And he said, Mom, I'm sorry. I was out of line. And then we'd all come back down. She'd come down. She could take it off. Like
I was just going to say, because that was
could
that.
take it off.
If your wife has a superpower, that is probably it.
Absolutely. And so then we could have a normal dinner. We could talk about whatever, even what it triggered it, but or something else entirely. But everybody was in a better place. But he had dealt with some growing up stuff, being a man, going and owning his participation, and his triggering, and apologizing appropriately.
If I had $1 for every family that came to see me to talk about how their child was playing video games and that was not a career, and what were they going to, I'd have a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
Right. And now we live in a reality where that actually is something you can go to college on a scholarship.
So we were having this conversation because my son is a software developer.
Yeah.
Phil and I were talking the other day about this conversation, and I lost track. I lose track because the stories are so complicated. I used to tell him, oh, I know what it was. I told her I used to teach junior high in the 70s, and there were a lot of kids in junior high that played air guitar.
Yeah.
And wouldn't study in school.
Yeah.
They'd just play air guitar and hum. And I would say to them,
Be a rock star.
What's your career plan? I'm going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
Well, do you play an instrument?
That's
no.
the personal fable.
Do you know anything about? Yeah, it's personal fable. And so I said, I don't know that you hear that now. What you hear is, I'm going to be a first-person shooter star for some game, and off we go to that. And I remember yelling at my kid when he was young and say, this isn't a career. You need to get your nose into the school books. And now he's a software engineer. He writes programs.
So he kind of did
He
it.
outsmarted me.
Right.
Yeah.
But the when they say I'm going to be a rock star, that personal fable, that's real to them. And adults get angry and frustrated. They're like, how can he believe that? Yeah. And that's what I am saying to the parents is, you don't understand. He does believe that. It is a part of the biology of the developmental stage that he's in. Denying the reality of what he is going through is not going to make this better.
Yeah, so as an adult, you say things like, well, okay, maybe, yeah, I can see that.
Well,
but what if you live in a country and western world? How are you going to earn a living?
Right.
Well, no. Well, maybe you should cover both grounds. You can be a rock star. You can plan to be a rock star, but can you also have a backup?
Well, and that's right. And so what I encourage parents to do is to say, okay, I recognize that playing guitar is incredibly important to you. And my dearest, fondest wish is that you do actually be able to express that and that you become wildly successful in that venue. But could we also, exactly what you're saying, think about a backup plan that could be an alternative? I know it's not something, could you do that for me?
Yeah, son, I can't afford a guitar. I can't get you a Fender, but I got a plastic bucket and a couple of sticks, and we could play drums along with it. I'll get one, you get one, and we'll play along. Let's put the record on. And then they look at you like, well, no, that's not what I want. I don't want you playing with me. I want to have my little personal fable. I want my dream. Okay, I get that. We all have dreams. But can you have your dream after you finish your homework? If we schedule time for it. You take a half-hour air guitar break. Can you come back and finish your math?
I've never prescribed that, but that is genius.
It is. I'm really good at this. I do it for a living.
Okay, let's take a break and we'll pick this up on the other side. Hey, Brett, if you were going to tell somebody to check out something on the internet to help them with their mental health, what would you tell them?
I tell them, listen to Psych with Mike.
Why would you tell them that?
Because it's probably one of the most easily listenable experiences you can have that will give you information that's useful for a whole spectrum of concerns that people have.
I agree, and I have actually been told that by at least a dozen people, several of whom were not married to me, and some of them didn't even know me.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It's when we get that kind of feedback from people, it is so incredibly humbling and overwhelming for me.
It is for both of us.
Yeah. So we really appreciate it. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we are back. And so when we left off, we were talking about that you had suggested that the child go do his homework and then take a 10-minute air guitar break, which I said was genius. I'd never thought about that, but I think that is an incredibly...
Get in it. Get your headphones on, crank the music up, play your air guitar, just get lost in it, set an alarm. then have it go off and come back and do your homework again. No harm, no foul.
But I think that it is incredibly important for parents to appreciate the way that adolescents think, just like I think it would be beneficial for parents to even appreciate how children think, which is, again, different than the way that
I think it would be beneficial for parents to take a course in adolescent development.
Well, that's what
Because, so many of those parents, when they find out they're going to be parents, they read the Dr. Spock book.
Yeah.
And they carry it around like a Bible.
If they do anything.
It's like, whoa, here Dr. Spock says this. So they're really into it then. And they go to, when a kid starts kindergarten, elementary school, they're there every time the doors are open, for parent conferences and for open house and for Valentine's Day and fun fair and all these other things. By the time they get to the 7th, 8th grade, they're like, nah, I did that. I did. I'm done with that. You're on your own here. The whole support system and focus on the child system just seems to evaporate when they hit adolescence.
But the parent refusing to recognize the developmental reality of the adolescent is just as egocentric as what the adolescent is living. And I point that out to parents, and they universally, I've never gotten a different answer. They always say, oh, I never looked at it that way.
Yeah.
Well, how else is there to look at it? Well, there really isn't another way to look at it. So I think that can be a really profound moment, but it's still trying to understand that is going to take some effort. So adolescence is a really, really unique period of time. And I remember being in a class with you, and this was the first time that I had ever heard this, but you explaining to me how adolescence is really a function or an artifact of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Before the Industrial Revolution, there was no adolescence.
Stanley separate Hall, stage of life.
Yeah. Didn't even coin the phrase adolescence until 1908.
Yeah.
So, or it might have actually been a little bit later than that even. But the point being that before there was the Industrial Revolution, once you reached puberty, you moved out of your parents' home. And
you had to go through what were called rites, R-I-T-E-S, not R-I-G-H-T-S, rites of passage. You had to be tested. Boys and girls were separated. Girls went through a set of tests to say, are they prepared to be mothers and wives and women in the tribe. Men, boys, had to go through tests to see if they're brave enough and skilled enough to be warriors and hunters or farmers or whatever the skill sets were for the tribe, to be then marked as adults and therefore responsible for their behavioral choices and responsible to the tribe for their contribution. So, adolescence is an artificial stage of life.
And not only that, but at 1900, when we first started thinking about adolescence and started building high schools, so in 1899, less than 2% of the population in the United States was in high school. By 1950, 92% of the adolescent population in the United States was in high school. So we didn't even have high schools until we decided we needed some place to house kids that couldn't go out and be on their own.
Body storage facility.
Yeah.
Separate them into small groups and have adults monitor them. And while you got them monitored, try to teach them something that society says has value.
So in 1900, the average age of first-time financial independence was 15. Today, in 2021, the average age of first-time financial independence is 27.
Full financial independence, yes. Right. Yeah.
And so we're not only is adolescence a brand new developmental period of life that's only existed for about 100 years, but the duration of adolescence has almost doubled during that period of time.
Well, it's not just the brain physiology, the development of the size and operating mechanisms of the brain, but also the culture. You have to find a more salient path for complex survival world than in primitive times.
And so I'm going to ask you if you agree with me on this. I have always said that you can be 12 or you can be 42, but as long as you live in my house, you have to live by my rules. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to give you more responsibility, but there can only be one person who's making the rules in the house. So imagine what that means. You have individuals now who go away to college and maybe even graduate school, return to live with their parents, and then there's this weird thing going on where they're living with me. I'm paying most of their freight, but then they're trying to live as
Say, I'm
adults.
adults. I get to decide when I come home.
I think that's wrong.
I agree.
And the reason is because until you are responsible for yourself, you shouldn't have the authority to make those kinds of adult decisions. Parents who delude themselves into believing this individual is an adult, I have to treat them like an adult, but I have to pay all their bills, I think they're doing that child a disservice.
Absolutely.
So you are in agreement with that.
Oh, I taught you that.
Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be autocratic. Like you said, you can't be in control.
No, you can lovingly say you are free to choose.
Yes.
You're free to walk out that door and go do it the
Exactly.
way you want to do it. You're just not free to do it in my house
Right.
that I pay for.
Right. That if you're going to be in my house,
Yeah.
you have to live and comply with the rules of my house. But you are welcome to go out and live independently whenever you want. But you have to understand that when you do that, you're going to be doing that on your own dime.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't have. I think that kind of messaging is getting really blurry in our
My
society.
wife and my 26-year-old son had a number of conversations about his fascination with and desire for a gun. Mm-hmm. And she said, not in my house. Mm-hmm. We don't have guns in my house. We're not going to have guns in my house. You can go take a class. You can have somebody train you. You can go to an armory. You can shoot all you want to shoot. You're not going to have a gun in the house. Mm-hmm. And then you get your own house, you'd have all the guns you want. But you don't have one in my house.
Mm-hmm. And now that he lives independently, did he ever go?
Not yet. Not to my knowledge.
So does he? Is that something that he's still fascinated by?
You know,
or
it's
did
hard
it
to
pass?
know. I don't know that it was a real desire.
Yeah.
I think it was a fantasy, but I think
Yeah.
it was also a way to jack her around. He knew that was a button to push that would get it. You know, so if he was wanting to play for half an hour and get mom going, get her worked up, he'd talk about knives and guns. I mean, he has a fascination with knives, and he has a big knife collection, which she didn't appreciate at all, but she didn't prevent in the same way. And a gun, she absolutely drew a line, not having a gun.
Yeah.
But knives, yeah, he had a bunch of knives.
Well, does he carry them, or does he just?
No,
have
he
them?
collects them.
Yeah, he
He
just
has them.
collects them. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. So he's not carrying them on his person.
Not to
and,
mine.
and I'm not suggesting that he would carry a gun on his person, but I'm just saying that I think that there is. I think that you can have a knife collection. I even suppose that you could have a gun collection.
Yeah. Well, you know, when we went to see him in college, one of his best friends had been in the Army and was a small arms instructor for the Army. And we discovered, and Spencer was kind of nervous telling us, but his friend was teaching him how to handle small arms. And they would go out to a shooting range and shoot on the weekend. And so we were down there for the weekend, and they invited us to go. Mm-hmm. And Phil said, well, we'll go, but I'm going to stay in the car.
Yeah.
I'm not going to shoot a gun.
Yeah.
And you know, your dad do whatever he wanted to do. So we all went out, and the guy taught me some things to do with a gun, and we all shot for a while, and then we went out to dinner. Everybody had a good time. So,
And did Phyllis stay in the car? Did she eventually get
no,
out?
she stayed in the car. When
Yeah.
we came back, she was fine. She read a book.
Well, of
and-
course she was fine, but I didn't know if she.
Well, she wasn't pouting.
then-
It wasn't angry.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, you're doing something I don't approve of, and so I'm going to be in a snit. She just said, that's not my game. I don't play.
But when you talk about the button pushing, a lot of parents do experience
Yeah.
adolescence as a period of button
Oh, it
pushing.
is.
And but
In both directions.
the reason
I push his
why
buttons every chance I got.
is that adolescents are programmed to argue with the primary caregiver until the primary caregiver does something that's inappropriate, and then that justifies the adolescent's behavior.
Well, but one of the things that happens in our house is whoever gets the smartest quip wins. Mm-hmm. And my kid is quick, and he could put me away at times. I'd be bloviating about something, and he'd say something under his breath, and his mother would crack up, and I'd be like, what'd you just say? Mm-hmm. And he'd tell me, and I would crack up. Mm-hmm. It would diffuse the situation. He's really good. But everybody in the house does that. Mm-hmm. We all take shots at each other that way verbally, and we all do it lovingly and peacefully and affectionately, and it helps
and we
make the rhythms
right.
work.
We did an episode. I was blanking on the word on transactional
had an
analysis,
episode, yeah.
and eventually I want to go back and do I'm okay, you're okay.
Yeah.
But that's for
Another day.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But when you
Will
talk
you be
about,
okay that day?
I hope so.
Yeah.
When you talk about this idea of these exchanges, one of the things that's important is that people have to approach that from a like personality state.
But it's like having a 3-gear car. You got to be able to shift all 3 gears. And if other people, if you're all riding laps and you're all in the same gear, then you can relate, and it can be really cool.
But what happens when one person...
then there's a clash.
Yeah, then there's a clash.
Yeah.
And so whose responsibility is it to be able to shift the gears, do you think?
I think everybody does it automatically. I think you get a feeling. I think something surges in you, and you take your move.
If there is a miscommunication, a disconnect...
So one of the earliest lessons that you have to teach your child is that you, as an adult, can recognize and will genuinely apologize when you misread a situation.
Anybody
go to your
who
child and
is...
say, I screwed up. I'm sorry. I yelled at you. You weren't doing anything bad. This was me. I was in a bad mood. I had a bad day. I misunderstood. Whatever it was. You didn't do anything bad. I did. Will you forgive me? It's got to be real. It's got to be genuine. It can't be fake words. But if you model that behavior for them, then when they're adolescents, everybody can do it.
Right.
And they will do it. They'll, like I was just saying, he'd have to go up and tell his mother, I'm sorry. I made you angry and hurt your feelings and ruined dinner. My fault. Will you forgive me? And she'd be like, oh, I love you, and come down, we'd have dinner. It has to be that everybody in the dynamic can shift those gears and learn to have synchromesh transmissions.
And so something that I tell people frequently...
Like the way I pull out that technical term, you're going to let that go? You should acknowledge that.
I was going on a different...
I know, you had a point to make.
It is my opinion that anybody who is chronologically older, unless there's a biological reason why they can't, is always responsible to be more emotionally mature than a person who is chronologically younger.
I would agree with that philosophically, but personally I've seen it be different.
I've seen it be different, and I think causes problems.
Yeah.
If the child is the most emotionally mature member of a household, that's a problem.
Overly parentified child, you have raging pathology run amok in the family.
Right. And when you...
we sound like a couple professionals.
When you were training your child to go up and apologize, you were creating a model of behavior, and then it's the child's...
As they say in the legal community, with malice aforethought.
Yeah.
I was planning that.
And then the child has to then internalize that behavior. But the child can't create that behavior.
Well, we got to the point where I wouldn't command it. When he was younger, I would command it.
Yeah.
But when he's a teenager, I'm like, you know what's going on.
Yes.
You know what just happened.
Right.
You know how to fix it. It's on you. I'm going to have dinner.
But the modeling...
You're the one carrying this plate of crap.
Is what's important. And that's why it's so important for the person who's chronologically older to take that responsibility to be more emotionally mature. If the child is the most emotionally mature member of any household, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a family dynamic that doesn't operate very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's a good place.
All right.
Do you think so?
I do.
All right. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. As always, you can get us on the YouTube, search Psych with Mike. You can find us on Facebook at Psych with Mike. You can find us on Twitter at Psych with Mike. And you can also find us on TikTok at Psych with Mike. So please, if you enjoy the show, then leave us a comment and a like on the Apple Podcasts. And if you ever have any questions, please reach out to us. We are always willing to be responsive. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.